New home sales surging 27% last month, the biggest jump in 47 years. But before you celebrate, hear this. One of America's top housing guys calling it a new mini bubble. One the government is creating with bailouts and tax credits to spur the buying. Even worse, there's a 50% chance it'll blow up in our face again. Toby, what do you say about that?
Well, it's a fact. A matter of fact, you know, if the federal government's giving 90% of the home mortgages out over the last 18 months, which is true. Number two, they have the, cash for clunkers, except it's cash for a clunker house. They've created the entire market. When that goes away, then real demand will find itself, and it ain't this level. And I would say this. I want our $13 billion back. They threw it in there, didn't ask us. I want the $13 billion back.
1.8 million households, $13 billion bucks. Mark, was it worth it?
Absolutely. This will not cause a housing bubble, and I'll tell you why. It's a short-term program, much like Cash for Clunkers. If you need to do it, you got to sell your house by April 30th. This program will go away.
Then it kept getting extended.
Mark, here's my entire wallet.
No, but here's the thing. It cannot create a bubble.
Oh,
it cannot create a bubble because it's short-term. Cash for Clunkers wasn't extended. What it does is it kept the auto market going at a very difficult time. This keeps the housing market going at a difficult time. And you know what? The auto market's doing pretty well now. Thank you, Cash for Clunkers. This will do the same for the housing market.
Okay, Brian, what do you think?
Well, first off, Mark, don't worry. That was all euros Toby's got. So they're not going to be worth much anyway in the long run. Here's the problem, though, right? If you want to get a private sector loan, you got to have a credit score of about 700. To get an FHA loan, you got to have a credit score of about 580, right? Which only 14% of the country has a worse score than that. And if you use the tax credit, you can get a home with, wait for it, nothing down, because the tax credit.
Dang, that sounds familiar, Brian.
Nothing down, bad credit, but don't worry, we'll get you a home. That makes me a little nervous.
Gary B., is this sustainable, this recovery, or is this just created by Washington?
Well, it's created by Washington, Brenda. And Mark did have one part right. He said, oh, this is just a short-term fix. Yes, that's almost the definition of a bubble. Yeah, it's short-term because the government, via flooding the market with these the buyer tax credit, the new home buyer tax credit, and not to mention all these low interest rates that the government's been offering via the Federal Reserve, keeping interest rates low, which has found its way into the mortgage market. That spurred this.
Gary, you know what a bubble is. A bubble is.
Hold on. That spurred.
It's when you buy something.
Spurred. Let me finish. Let me finish. That spurred this demand for homes. Once that goes away, once the Fed starts jacking up interest rates, now that the income credit, the buyer credit's gone away, what's going to happen to those artificially inflated prices? It's got to go down. Again, by definition, there's your bubble. Housing prices have to go down.
Hold on, Mark. Just 1 minute. I want to get Pat in here. Pat, what's your view on this?
Well, certainly, I mean, FHA is replicating some of the worst excesses of the housing, subprime bubble back in, 05, 06. I mean, there's no doubt about that. And so the natural rate of demand is lower. I would hesitate to be so bombastic as to call it a bubble, simply because there's not a systemic crisis that's going to blow up a whole lot of banks the way there was a few years ago. Just to make sure we're clear about that. But it is unsustainable demand. It does mean that when that goes away, house prices will come down because the natural rate of demand
blow up the FHA.
It'll only blow up our government.
Okay, wait. I got to give 10 seconds to Mark before he goes.
8 seconds.
Okay, a bubble is when you have more demand than is dictated by the market. In a recession, you have less demand than should be dictated by the market. That's what Franklin Roosevelt learned in the 1930s. That's how the government gets you out of depressions.
We're going to leave you with that, all right? Then thank you very much for joining us. You're a good sport.